said, you have this fear of being a disappointment, and you're thinking about other people, but you're really thinking about what they're thinking about you. You're still thinking about you while you think about them, which is really still 100% totally self-centered. I had actually tried desperately to stop the behavior. I'd got on 2 really long fasts, thinking that maybe if I did a Gandhi in front of God, he'd set me free. The funniest thing, he said, well, if God's saying it, why does it need to make sense to you? What God wanted, all I was going to get was mercy. I wasn't going to get what I deserved. Probably was trying to make her happy rather than loving her. That wasn't going to work.
What's the difference between those two?
It's huge difference. But I don't know that it's taking long. It's a hard journey. I always say the one who strayed, all they get is blessed. What is wrong with me? You're trying to take responsibility. You're not blaming your wife. That makes you a good candidate to reconcile with. If, on the other hand, you said, look, you're just blowing this out of proportion.
I will just roll into an intro, and then we'll just get started. It's very conversational. Feel free to throw things back at me, and it's like us going for lunch, and it happens to be recorded. So,
sounds good.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Furious the Curious Show. Today, I'm sitting down with Rick Reynolds, the founder of Affair Recovery, an organization that helps restore those in crisis to extraordinary lives of meaning and purpose. It's a heavy topic: affairs, betrayal, forgiveness, healing, but it's also a real one. And a lot of people carry this quietly, especially in the church, and don't know where to turn or what healing even looks like. And so Rick has not only helped thousands of couples walk through this, he's lived it himself. And so my hope today is to bring clarity, honesty, and real hope, not with the churchy fluff and pretending to be easy, but just a real chat. So Rick, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's my honor, and I really appreciate you helping to get the word out to hurting couples, because there's a lot of people and they don't know where to go.
That's right. Yeah. So maybe let's start with your story. How did you get into this work, and what is it, in your own words, that you do now?
So I volunteered for this work. Actually, when I got married in 1978, I'm a recovering sex addict, and I was acting out pretty much from 3 months into the marriage. But in March 12th, actually, of 1984, I actually had a vision. We were on a church retreat, actually, with my best friend and my wife's best friend, who I was currently in an affair with. And the retreat, Kyle, was on the covenant of marriage, which was a great retreat to be at when you're in the midst of an affair. And at that point, I remember this guy talking. I had my affair partner over here. I had my wife over here. And I had a vision, and I don't even believe in visions, but suddenly I was sitting in this huge room in front of this being of light. It's kind of like when people have near-death experiences, they always talk about that being of light. And I knew immediately it was Jesus. And it was so intense. The love was so intense. It was just literally flowing through me like I was a wisp of smoke. It was just permeating every cell. And then on this side of the screen that I was looking at was my life, like a life review. And it was just black. It was kind of sucking light into it. And I was such an arrogant jerk. I yelled up over my shoulder and I said, hey, man, you got the wrong picture up on the left. Because I'd always felt God was fortunate to have me on his team. I mean, I was a worship leader. I was leading a small group. I was actually teaching a class at church on marriage. I was about to get the governor's award for the best program in the state of Colorado. And I thought, yeah. But then he just goes, that's you. And as I look back, I just keep seeing scene after scene after scene of my life. And everything is just void of love. I mean, I'm not loving. And I would have told you I was amazingly loving. But I saw that if you're a fabad, you have this fear of being a disappointment, and you're thinking about other people, but you're really thinking about what they're thinking about you. You're still thinking about you while you think about them, which is really still 100% totally self-centered. And at first, I was just horrified. I couldn't believe that I was such a self-centered,
And
you know,
this was all the stuff you're realizing in this vision. And where were
in this
you?
vision.
Where were you? Where were you? Like in a hall somewhere, or outside, or where?
I was still in the seat, as best I know, I was still in the seat in that conference, Kyle, but I wasn't there. I was literally in this um, big room with Jesus.
Brilliant.
And at first, I'm just kind of horrified. And then I thought, why is he showing this to me? And it dawned on me that this must be judgment. And I'd just been found wanting, and I'm on the way down. So I went from horrified to absolutely terrified. And just pretty much every hair on my body stood up because I thought life was done. And the Lord let that slip in. And then he said to me, and I love you. Don't you get it? I love you just the way you are, not as you ought to be. Yeah, that's not good, but you can do better than that. But I love you. And just over and over, he kept telling me how much he loved me while he let me or made me watch all the people I destroyed. And so I just began to weep. And that's when he stuck me back in the conference room. And I am just bawling like a baby. And I just said through my tears, "What do you want from me?" And he said, "I just want you to be honest." And I thought, "You've got to be kidding me." So I went to the guy, the speaker at this event. He'd been a mentor of mine years before, and he had brought a group in from Nashville. And I told him the story of the affair. And his first question to me was, "Well, what's God telling you?" And I said, "Funny you should ask, but he's telling me that I should be honest, but that doesn't make sense to me because why should everybody else be hurt because of what I've done?" Now, up to that point, what was interesting going into that retreat, I had actually tried desperately to stop the behavior. I'd got on 2 really long fasts, thinking that maybe if I did a Gandhi in front of God, he'd set me free. The only thing
And
that
the behavior was is that every couple of weeks you would meet up with your friend's wife,
oh,
or
I was
what was the
pretty
behavior?
much weekly, pretty
Okay.
much weekly. And so it was pretty frequent, but I was also doing other stuff. I mean, I was still into porn, a lot of porn and other that and this affair. And after my second fast, an amazing thing did happen. I was probably the skinniest adulterer in Denver, Colorado, but I still didn't stop, right? And so I was suicidal at that point, to be honest. Um,
Can I pause you there?
getting,
I just have
yeah,
I have a question about that. You said you were trying to stop and you couldn't. You try to do fasts. A lot of people maybe won't understand that when they say you try to stop. What do you mean try to stop? You just don't go anymore. And I think I know what you're getting at because I've had similar experiences also with different addictions. But can you talk about that? Like what
yes,
is it?
absolutely. So I thought one of my ways I lived life is I thought, the way to get away with this, because I didn't ever want to be uncovered, was to make sure you never dig the latrine too close to the mess tent. But once this got going, I knew that I couldn't sustain that. So I remember walking into my office. This must have been probably toward the middle of February 1984. And I just said, well, I actually heard the Lord speak to me because I was already in the affair. And he said, I just heard him say, "You can't stop." And I said, "Oh, yeah, watch this." And I really deceived myself as an addict. I had thought for years, I believed I could stop this behavior whenever I wanted. And so that's when I started doing the fast because I thought I need to stop this sexual acting out. Because to me, there were 2 things that really weren't optional: getting caught or getting divorced. So it's like I knew I had to stop it. And that's why I suddenly, started coming up with plans, fasting, praying, reading my Bible more. I just thought, if I work hard enough, I can stop the behavior. That's when I discovered I was an addict. And 1984, Kyle, is the year that Patrick Carnes wrote the book Out of the Shadows. So sexual addiction wasn't even coined until that year. And so that's what I was trying to stop. Like an alcoholic trying to stop drinking, I was just trying to cut it out. But what happened is she would call or I would call. And the second, I might go a day or two, but the second that contact happened, it was like I fell all the way back into it. And then I'd try to stop again. And one of the things we were doing, I was trying to get her to agree with me that we needed to stop. The thing I've learned since is that affairs don't end bilaterally. It's not two people agreeing to leave an affair. Affairs end unilaterally, where one person decides they're done, regardless of what the other person wants. And as long as I kept trying to, I think, not hurt her, not hurt Steph, as long as I was trying to manage it, there was no way I was going to stop because I would fall back into it. And that's when I got suicidal because I thought the only way out of this thing is to kill myself. I was that crazy at that moment. And, honestly, if you take away the options of being honest and you kind of limit what the alternatives are. And suicide was my best alternative. So when I told this guy about the affair and he said, "What's God telling you?" And I said, to be honest, and he said, but that doesn't make sense. He said the funniest thing. He said, "Well, if God's saying it, why does it need to make sense to you?" And I kind of thought, that makes sense. And then I thought, he said, "Would you like some advice?" And I'm just kind of shattered here. And I said, "Sure." And he said, "What's the consequence of sin?" And I said, "Well, that's death." He said, "Right. So anything they do short of killing you is really going to be mercy. You're not going to really get what you deserve." And I thought, ouch. But it's true. Doing what God wanted, all I was going to get was mercy. I wasn't going to get what I deserved. And that really helped. I thought, there's only one thing that's important now. And it's, being like this with the Lord. I had to begin to obey God, not try to maintain my image and not hurt people or disappoint people. The only thing that mattered was getting right with God. I didn't tell Stephanie that night because we were sharing a room with the other couple and I didn't want to actually play 20 questions.
Yeah.
I knew I couldn't tell my affair partner because if I told her, I wouldn't do it.
What was that like being at a marriage conference with another couple that you were having an affair with? That seems crazy in its own right.
It was totally insane. And it was just like, it was crazy. In fact, I remember the next day we were skiing. I think we were at Keystone, and I was skiing down through the trees thinking that maybe I could wrap myself around a tree and kill myself so that I wouldn't have to be honest, right? I'm just sorry Wide World of Sports didn't have a camera catching me because I couldn't even hit a tree. It's like the Holy Spirit was making me world class. And so when we left, I said, when we hit the pavement, as we come out of the driveway, I'm going to tell her. And I just said, "I've got something to tell you." And I started off, "I'm in an affair, blah, blah, blah." And I just kept hearing the Holy Spirit go, "Be honest, be honest, be honest." And I was really trying to tell the story, but I was actually trying to tell the story from the beginning of, I was molested at age 4. Everything that had happened from 4 on. And it hit me probably 3 or 4 days into it. I went to Steph and I said, "Look."
Steph's your wife?
Yes, Stephanie's my wife. I said, First off, I don't blame you if you decide to leave me, if you want to divorce me, because I want to divorce me. So why wouldn't you want to divorce me? I mean, I can't hardly stand me. Um, and I also recognize that I really can't make saving this marriage the goal, because if my goal is to save the marriage, it is not pragmatically smart for me to be honest with you like this. I mean, why would I be telling you everything that makes you want to divorce me? But I can tell you what my goal is. It's to become who God made me to be.
And you knew
And when
that
it quit,
4 days after you told,
oh yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I
because
was
that's quite.
talking.
I would say that's quite unique, though. You I mean you work with a lot more couples
Yeah,
than almost anybody. I would say initially the person that cheated is trying to keep their world together still and actually try to save their marriage so they can save their image, but they're not actually focused on their relationship with God until they wake up
right.
more. But you noticed it almost right away.
Because I started, if you remember, that vision was it. I mean, I was
Mm,
so astounded by the fact that he loved me. I mean, it was like scripture had come alive for me. And everything I read had been written
mm.
directly for me. And so I was mostly just spending my time in scripture, but it did hit me. If I went back to trying to please Stephanie and make her happy, because that had been one of my worst problems, was trying to make her happy rather than loving her, that wasn't going to work.
What's the difference between
Um,
those two?
it's huge difference. So making her happy is it's basically pretty codependent. It's living in a way, it's doing everything that she wants so she'll get the life she would like. Um, so psychologically, uh, most of us, I would say all marriage problems, Kyle, happen between ages 0 and 18. Uh, where we get in trouble in marriage, it's the strategies we develop to survive as a child that we keep applying to a new season of life, and they don't really work. In my life growing up, I had what's called an attunement survival strategy. That's one of the survival strategies. And I was really attuned to my parents, and to make them happy, because when they weren't, things could get a little bit Western. I mean, we could get, um, there was a lot of, temper, anger. So I was going to keep them happy. Um, and I thought when I got married, that was also my job, to stay attuned to Stephanie and work at making her happy. The problem with that, is that I became really resentful, because I would ask Stephanie what she wanted, and she would tell me, and then I'd go do it, even if I didn't want to do it, because I felt it was my responsibility to make her happy. And I got resentful over the years, because I thought, if she loved me, she would ask what I wanted.
Mm.
She would, not just tell me what she wants, she would be interested in knowing what I want. And so I would tell myself, she is so self centered. She doesn't love me. She doesn't care. And I became wildly resentful. Um, but I began to see the problem wasn't that, she didn't ask me what I wanted. The problem was I didn't know how to say what I wanted, because I'd never done that. Growing up, I wasn't going to be a burden. I wasn't going to say anything.
Mm.
So I blamed Stephanie, though, instead of recognizing I'm the one with the deficit and didn't know how to be in a relationship and say what I needed or wanted. And so I think that was not healthy in the least. Um, it was ultimately compromising myself for her sake. Now, love, on the other hand, to me, love will always act in the best interest of another person. And it's authentic, and it will speak up. Uh, that's radically different than just trying to do everything she wants to make her happy, because I need to have a voice. We both needed to have a voice if we're going to have a real relationship. Uh, and so when I told her that, it's not, I can't try to save the marriage, but what I can do is become the man God wants me to be. And maybe I'll become somebody that I want to be with and that you would like to be with. And I just hope you'll give me a chance to do that. and a chance to love you the way I think you're supposed to be loved, that you need to see actions. You don't need me to tell you I won't do it again.
Hmm.
You just need to know that I'm working at being a man of God. So
Yeah.
that became my pursuit.
I'm really blown away how quickly you came to that realization, and I can just understand how the vision, like a vision like that, can really hit you really, really hard. Would you say you would have been a Christian before that time, or was that when you came to repentance?
Dude, I think I would have told you I was initially a Bible major at the college I went to, took Greek, I didn't take Hebrew, but I really hated biblical languages. So I became a social worker instead. But yeah, I would have told you I was definitely a Christian. But if you'd looked at it, I was probably a Pharisee. I was more like making disciples twice fit for hell. It wasn't about grace or mercy. To me, it was about performance.
Hmm.
I kind of believed if I was saved, if saved, barely saved, it was, I sure as heck needed to repent and ask God to forgive me for all my sins if I was dying so that I could get the slate clean
Hmm. Yeah.
before, you know. But the problem is I didn't understand God's grace and I didn't understand his mercy until that vision.
Hmm.
And that blew me away. And to me, when you can get the Lord, um, when it just became about my relationship with him, I mean, I talked to him all the time. It was great. I was probably more at peace than I've ever been in my entire life.
Hmm.
And that's what saved our marriage. I think Stephanie could see me really working at never being that other person again, that I wanted to be somebody who I'd been made to be. And that I had a boldness, I had a voice. I became truly loving instead of being
Hmm.
resentful. I appreciated her.
Hmm.
And
How did she
there's
respond to when you first told her, and in the months following? Like, what happened? Did you guys separate? How did you
no,
get?
she was skeptical. Um, as I was a marriage and family therapist at the time, I just about finished my training in Denver at the Colorado Institute for Marriage and Family Therapy. So I knew people in the field, and I tried to find a therapist for us, and all they said was, I don't know what to do. Went to some pastors. They said they didn't know how to help, but they would pray for us. Um, and I remember 2 days after I told her, she went to the bookstore to try to find a book on infidelity. And I think the worst thing for her is she had to ask. She couldn't find anything. And there was only one book in the bookstore in 84. It was called Myth of the Greener Grass. And she brought that book home, but she was so ashamed. And this is really true for people who've been betrayed. She was so ashamed. And I said, why are you ashamed? I'm the one that's been screwing up, not you. And I guarantee it probably took me years before I recognized that for somebody who's been betrayed, um, there's an ascribed shame they have for just being with you. I
Yeah.
didn't get that. I think that, well, in North America, Western Europe, New Zealand, Australia, our cultures are based on individualism and postmodernism. But almost every other culture is honor shame based. This is something I didn't understand. And the reason, like a Japanese child will work hard at doing well in school, isn't for recognition. It's because they don't want to dishonor their family. So there's a different motivation. And we don't think in terms in our Western culture of honor shame. But what I began to see is when somebody's been dishonored, it feels dishonorable to stay with them.
Hmm.
In fact, in many cultures, if somebody in the family dishonors you, they kill them. It's called honor violence.
Yeah.
The only way, if a Japanese soldier in World War II, right, dishonored Japan, the way they restored the honor of Japan was to kill themselves. And so betrayed spouses feel this incredible shame because they've been dishonored, and they feel dishonorable staying with the person who dishonored them. And it's almost like Steph and I had spent all this time building this reputation that we were both proud of. It's like our social credit score, right? The good
Mm.
opinion that we hold in the eyes of others. And now suddenly I had totally tanked our credit report, you know? And so when she's in that bookstore, she feels everybody sees that she's with somebody who cheated on her and that she's a fool. And well, that book was interesting, though. There was a chapter in it called The Anatomy of an Affair. And I was super excited when I read it. And I showed Steph, I said, look, read this story. I'm not the only one. There's somebody else just like me. Because she thought I was a freak, right? We didn't know anybody who had gone through this. And
She
4
was
weeks
she
in,
angry? Like when you told her in the
oh,
car at home,
yeah.
like what was her initial responses and how did she like?
She was in shock. I mean, total shock. And she didn't know what she wanted to do. We had we had an 18-month-old at the time. And she had lost all of her friends. It was highly public. We were suddenly kind of uh, out of that church. Nobody ever followed up. Um, the first person she called actually was my mom because she and mom were close and she didn't know who else to talk to. Um,
Why would she have lost her friends? Is that the same thing as well that people don't know?
yeah, it was that. And so the couple, the one lady I was having the affair with, they stayed at the church. They stayed in the small group. Um, that group stayed together. It's like we were kind of jettisoned.
Mm.
And it was bizarre. Nobody ever even, one person called, actually, an elder called just to check on us. But other than that, it's like we were invisible people. And there, we found some new friends, another couple that was close to us, and she found a few ladies she could talk to, and I found a couple of guys I could talk to. But our life became very small at
Mm.
that point. And so we were floundering. We didn't know what to do. So there was a spiritual renewal conference in Nashville that we'd been invited to. The guy I'd confessed to about the affair, and he had invited us to come stay with him. So we go to this conference, about 1,000 people there. And he said to me the first night, he said, I think you ought to talk to Jamie, the guy leading this spiritual renewal conference. His name was Jamie Buckingham. He said, I think you ought to talk to Jamie. I hear he has a similar story to yours. And I said, you think or you know? And he said, well, I don't know for certain. And I said, so you want me to go up to a guy leading this conference with over 1,000 people and say, hey, I cheated on my wife. I hear you did the same. Um, Now Stephanie's going, oh, you got to talk to him. And I'm going, you're crazy. I finally said, okay, if I see him alone, I'll talk to him. Because, I mean,
Yeah.
the shame was big. And so we skip one breakout session. Steph and I walk out on campus. We're on the Belmont campus in Nashville. And there is like Jamie and Jackie sitting underneath this gazebo, and it's like the rapture's occurred. There's nobody else in sight on the entire campus. And I thought, well, that's a coincidence. So Steph drags me over there, and we sit down, and I said, I hear we might have something in common. He said, what's that? And I said, well, I cheated on my wife. And he said, yeah, I did that. I said, thank God, you know. He said, what have y'all been doing? And I told him that we'd found that one book and read it. And he said, I've read that book. I said, did you read that chapter, The Anatomy of an Affair? You know, because that guy's story is just like me. And he said, yeah, that's me. And I said, yeah, that's me. He said, no, Rick, that's my story.
Mm.
Peterson came and interviewed me. And I thought, holy smoke. I wonder what the odds are that I would meet a guy from Florida in Nashville and I would have come in from Denver and it's the same guy whose story I related to in a book. You know, I thought that's a God thing.
Mm.
But that's really what saved our marriage, Kyle. It was Jamie and Jackie just took us under their wing, and
How long was
they
this after the affair?
because this was 4 weeks,
Okay.
so it was
Not
early
long.
on. No, not at
Yeah.
all. And, they just shared their life with us and what they had done, and we did the same thing, and ultimately, that is how, or what the model that Affair Recovery was built after. It's
Okay.
like having others who have gone through it, and easy access, so you don't have to be ashamed, but the, that community, because he put us in touch with other people, they really carried us. And every time Steph would come to the place where she'd be going, I'm going to leave you, in kind of her hurt and her pain, the phone would ring and it
Mm.
would be Jackie or somebody else. When we first sat down with him, I remember the first question Stephanie asked Jackie. She said, why in the world did you stay with him? I thought, well, that's not a good question. But Jackie just said, Steph, I had 5 kids. What was I supposed to do? And she said, I'm really glad I did. It's been an amazing journey. But at the time, I was just shocked and I didn't hardly know what to do. And I think having another woman who really understood, and then other women we were put in touch with, or couples, it's the thing that gave us hope because we could see others that were thriving and had great relationships. And this wasn't the thing that had defined them. It was the thing that had refined them and caused them to grow and become something more. And that's one of the things I believe is that this is something God can use as a catalyst for transformation. And it's a thing, probably your best chance in the world to grow and to become conformed to the image of Christ. You will learn a
Yeah.
lot. So it's not, I mean, I don't wish it for
It's a really quick
anybody.
way to get rid of the facade and really deal with what you're actually needing to deal with.
Yeah, it gets it out in the open very, very quickly. And it also lets you see what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it strips away all the facade, like you said. And so that first year was interesting because of them. We began to grow. Fortunately, um,
Did you stay on as a therapist, by the way, at that time? You kept working as a therapist?
yeah, I
Oh,
did
well.
for a while. I wanted to get out. I didn't want to be a therapist, so I started praying that God would open a door um, to let me do something else. So one of the first things I did, I knew I had to start living for God. So I was one of these guys that had always tried to make my dad happy.
Mm.
Dad was really strong. I mean, um, and so I actually called him after Steph called mom and said, um, I've got some things to tell you, and I want to tell you what God's telling me. One of the things I told him is, I'm leaving the denomination that I grew up in. Now, part of that's because God told me very clearly to get out of there and find something different. Partially because I had this crazy theology where I thought I was saved by right theology, by believing the right thing. That's part of how I was going to be saved. And it was like the Lord was saying, no, you're saved by grace through faith in Christ. But ultimately, you need to go some other place that you're not comfortable. And so when I told him we were leaving that church, my dad's first response was, well, he actually said some pretty funny things like, well, you can be so spiritually minded, you will not be any earthly good. I went, oh, that's interesting. And then he told me, you can't live your life on the edge of a dime. You can't be that radical spiritually. And I said, I better be, because I told the Lord, if I ever fell back into this, I wanted him to take my life. So, and I know if I don't stay radical and don't stay with the Lord, I'll fall back into it and I don't want to die. But anyway, so Dad was pretty upset because our family had been a part of that denomination for generations. And nobody had ever left that denomination. So I was basically disinherited and cut off, which was, I mean, it was okay.
Cut off from your family, like no more
Oh
contact?
yeah.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
okay.
I just they well, Steph stayed in contact with my mom, but dad wasn't speaking to me anymore. I figured I was
Huh.
going to be disinherited, but that didn't matter. All I wanted was to be with the Lord. All I wanted to know was to know Christ and the power of his resurrection, as it says in Philippians 2, 3.
That must have been
Excuse me.
painful, though. Like your
Oh,
dad
it was. It was sad. But at the same time, I felt like I was finally living my life. I wasn't living the life he wanted me to
Yeah,
live.
yeah, yeah,
I was just, I was, it was me and God. All I had to do was please God. And that seemed a lot better than trying to make everybody else happy. And about 6 months after that, my dad called. We hadn't even spoken. And he said, "Would you come head up the construction division of my real estate company?" Dad was a land developer, home builder. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, "What?" And I said, "You're just trying to get me back under your thumb, right?"
yeah.
And he said, "No." He said, "I've thought about it, and not many people have ever told me no. And I respect that. So if you would like to have this position, I've got to replace it. We'd like to be close to the grandkids, but you can live your life as you want." I mean, I was shocked, and but I did want to quit being a therapist.
Yeah,
So I decided it would probably be better to go from being, a home wrecker. I could become a home builder.
yeah.
So I made the career change and did that for 5 years before I became a therapist again.
Okay. And you said you had in our first call when we set this podcast up, you said you had a relapse or an affair again
Oh,
five
yeah,
5 years after. How did that happen?
absolutely.
Because you did all this healing work. You had this couple beside you. You switched churches. What happened there?
So I think that the mistake people make, Kyle, is they'll sit there, and I see it all the time. I will never do it again. You can trust me. I mean, I guarantee I will not do this again. And they mean it. 5 years into it, I'm old enough. So back to the mid 80s in Texas, or 86, 87, the price of oil dropped, oil tanked. Every savings and loan in the state of Texas was closed by the FDIC, and every real estate note was called in the entire state of Texas. So every home builder, every land developer went bankrupt. Steph and I even ended up on food stamps at that point. We lost a lot of money. But it was during that time when I was really getting squeezed. It was just one small slip. Again, it's one little moral crack that gets you.
Yeah,
And then suddenly I couldn't stop. I was like that cartoon character sliding down a roof, and he can't stop the momentum. I even talked to some guys about it, seeing if they could help me. But there was one person I wasn't going to tell, and that was definitely Stephanie. Um, and not because I thought she would drop kick me through the goalpost of life, but it was because I just couldn't believe I was stupid enough to be struggling with this again. And as I kind of was on that slope for about 6 months, I never got back into a relationship, but I was being inappropriate, and I lost a job because of it. And I remember coming home and Steph said, "What happened?" And have you ever been in a car wreck where everything goes into slow motion? I mean, it
hmm
was just like that. It's just like time kind of froze, and I think the Lord showed me I was doing the same thing in '89 that I had been doing back in '84, which I was trying to control it. I was trying to manage it. I was trying to be good. But
mm
the only way I got free was by being honest,
Yeah,
being
honesty is so
authentic.
key.
And so it's not a matter of trying to hide it and control it. The way you kill it is by exposing it. So I said, well, I've started acting out again. And as I remember, it took us about 2 weeks to work through that, partially because what we had experienced was so good, but second, because I figured out the truth. So when we got married, I said that I would be faithful to death do us part. And then after I blew everything up in 84, I said, I will never do this again. And I meant it. And now I find myself in 89 going back down that path again. And so it hit me, this isn't about saying I won't do it again. It's I can be 100 miles down the road, but I'm still 10 feet from the ditch. So it's figuring out, how do I live to make sure I don't do it again? It's because I can deceive myself and get back there again. So I told Steph, I said, look, if you ever see me not doing certain things, and I named off a couple of things, you have to promise me, if we're going to do this, that you'll file for divorce, because I don't want to hurt you again. But I honestly believe if I don't keep doing these things, I'll fall back. I am capable of doing it again,
What would these
even
things have
though I don't
been?
want to. Well, one of the biggest ones was, you have to see me meeting on a regular basis with a group of other men, that where we're just trying to be honest. I mean, so part of it was community, part of it was spiritual, part of it was just how I was living health wise. Part of it was not trusting me. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I don't trust me.
Yeah.
And the fact that I don't trust me is what allows Stephanie to trust me, because people don't relapse because they're weak. They relapse because they're strong, or they think they're
Think they're
strong, and they
strong. Pride comes before the fall.
put themselves in situations where they think they can handle it and they can't. So it's almost like, I'm only going to be as weak as my strongest link. So that was 38 years ago, 37. So I know you can go a long time without acting out. It's just that you have to live in a way to stay safe.
Yeah.
It's almost like Paul said in 2 Corinthians 10, because of everything I'd accomplished, and excuse my paraphrase here, but because of everything I'd accomplished in life, so that I wouldn't get a big head, God gave me the gift of an addiction to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. At first, Satan's angels did their best to get me down, but what they really did was push me right back down to my knees. At first, I couldn't see this addiction as a gift, and I just kept begging God to take it away and to heal me. 3 times I fasted and I prayed, and then the Lord finally said, Paul, look, my grace is enough. It's all you need. You don't need to be whole or fixed. Actually, my strength comes into its own in your weakness. He said, well, when I finally wrapped my mind around that, I began to see that this wasn't some sort of curse, but this was my greatest gift, because where I am weak, that's where I'm strong.
Yeah.
And so I began to look at it not as something wrong with me, but something that God had gifted me. I just had to figure out how to live the right way. And so it's not a disadvantage. I don't have a choice when I wake up in the morning of trying to do it on my own. I mean, I'm going to start by saying, Jesus, you're welcome here. Father, you're welcome. Holy Spirit, you're welcome. I don't have anything anybody needs. If you don't show up, I'll blow the world up.
Yeah.
Is it a disadvantage? I don't think so. I get to walk really close with God.
Yeah. And your hope and strength is in him, which is ultimately what he wants.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to get to why affairs happen, but how did you get into the affair recovery organization? How did you start that? And what is it that you do now in a nutshell?
So it happened because I decided I would never seek to be a marriage therapist again unless the Lord opened the door and somebody called me. Minirth Meyer called and said they had heard about me from somebody, and they said, we heard you used to be a therapist. And I did an interview, and right before I left, I thought, boy, I better tell them the whole story, or they're going to find out. So I told them, and they said, well, that's great. You can have all the sex addicts and all the affairs. And I went, okay. There was a lot. And so I actually started doing couples groups and found out that treating couples in a community was much easier than treating them individually. Um, and in about the year 2001, I just heard the Lord very clearly say to me, you need to go buy, he said website, domain, whatever, Affair Recovery Center and affairrecovery.com. And so I went to a friend and I said, how do you buy a website? And he said, well, he told me one thing before that. The first thing he told me was, I want you to treat 50,000 couples annually. And so I thought, how in the
50,000 50,000
50,000
annually.
couples annually? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I went, well, that would, I mean, I'm a workaholic, but I'm not, can't work that many hours. So that was kind of the goal. And then he told me to go buy this website. So I called some people and said, how do you buy, a URL basically? And they said, well, I think they sent me to GoDaddy. And they said, but you won't be able to get it because all the good domains have been bought up already. So of course everything's available. So I buy it because I thought, if you're going to do that many, it has to be virtual. It has to be something that could scale to a large number. So with the call of 50,000 couples a year, and once I had the website, I started talking to people about what I felt God was calling me to, and other people joined me in that venture. And I took the in-person groups we had been doing, and we decided, would they work virtually? So we did the research. They worked fine. And then I got a CEO. We made an official launch in 2011. And now,
So what happened from 2001 to 2011?
I'll tell you what, it was basically writing curriculum. It was, so if you think about how a lot of websites work, especially back in the early 2000s, it's like they were information dissemination. So it's like, there's a tree, you got to climb on the tree and try to find what you're looking for. And one of the first things I did was said, no, I need to be able to funnel very specific information to people if I'm going to help them. And so I wrote a thing called the Affair Analyzer, where it would look at the type of affair, the reaction type, the betrayed spouse had, motivation for the, wayward spouse, the power structure. Anyway, so this whole thing got built, and then we just started running the groups virtually to see if, and doing outcome studies to see if it worked. So that's what was going on till about 2009. And that's when I got a CEO, because I had taken it about as far as I could take it. But to do a large business that way, I needed a lot of business skills. And so an MBA, Andrew Crump, my CEO, kind of heard, and he took on the vision. He said, I'll do this. I said, but there's no money. He said, I'll work for free the first 6 months until we figure something out. And with his help, it just slowly began to grow. And, there's a lot of free services that we decided to offer at affairrecovery.com, only because if we could stop couples from even filing for divorce and give them hope, then maybe we could get to a place we could support them, or other people could support them, and they would be able to work through this. Because honestly, Paul says, I had a ministry of reconciliation. And to me, this is like slow pitch softball. If you can actually treat 50,000 couples annually, you can make a difference in the legacy of so many children. And so that's ultimately what we wanted to do. And we have been continuing to test to make sure that what we're doing is effective.
Yeah.
And we just finished a study, in fact, with over 20,000 couples over the last 14 years. so we can show that people heal and they get well and there's hope, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what they need to
What's your
know.
success? What's your success rate? I think it's quite high,
Um,
isn't it? It's like
yeah, it's very high. It's uh, it's somewhere around. I th-
I thought it was like
what it
84. I think I read somewhere.
yeah, it was high at 5 years. Now, in that, I would probably say, because you have to do personal contact. I'm actually thinking it's probably closer to 75 to 80, but in the survey stuff, it's around 84 at 5
Hmm.
years.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. So, what is the process you take? So, someone reaches out to you because their spouse had an affair or they had an affair. What is it? What are the steps? What is the recovery? What does it look like practically?
So what we hope, if somebody comes to the website, is they will initially do one of two things. Take the affair analyzer, which will give them about a 4-page report on what type of affair, what the particular struggles that couple will have. So the affair analyzer actually ended up, because it's a decision tree, with over 850 different outcomes.
Oh wow,
And so we can funnel very specific information. But the second thing we put together was what's called a free boot camp. So what we found is if people will take just a boot camp, and all the boot camp is doing for 7 days is getting them to talk, that if they'll finish, in fact, it's amazing. I don't want to
this is an
misquote this,
in-person
but
thing. This is an online thing that
no,
people
it's
do.
just online. It's free. They can get it online, and then they just each day it gives them questions to answer and ways to talk, and it gives some educational materials,
Yeah,
but it tells them that, hey, there is, and it has videos so you can see other couples talking, but it basically just says, if you want, if you choose, um, you can do this. And we tell people, I don't blame you for wanting to leave a person. At the same time, you're not a fool to be a part of somebody's, redemption.
yeah,
And maybe both of you, this is still your best chance potentially to have what you want, but you won't know unless you at least take the time to explore what's possible.
yeah. Okay. Well,
And from,
why do go ahead?
I was going to say, from there, they can do courses. That's where things get, I think, far more intense. But it's, again, we believe if you're in community, that the community helps carry the load. It's actually a social baseline theory. It's called load sharing. But that community supports you in the process. And so it also, infidelity is about an attachment rupture. And it totally distorts our identity, our sense of our confidence, a lot of things. And it takes attachment to heal attachment. And having other couples going through it or that have already gone through it provides that safe space for that attachment to begin to heal. Maybe you don't trust your mate yet, but at least you can get your life back and begin, instead of isolating, feel good about yourself and get on with life.
Yeah, yeah. Heal, heal. Okay. Okay. I want to move on to more some questions. Why do affairs happen in the first place? Like, what's at the root of it? Like, I know that the culture has been sexualized in so many different ways, and there's just so much crap out there, and a lot of people attribute it to that. But is it? I think it's more than that. What would you say to that?
So, so I would say there are probably multiple reasons. The one thing we do say is that bad marriages don't cause affairs. Bad marriages may take a third of the responsibility. I'm not saying everybody's marriage is perfect,
Yeah,
but two people can be in a bad marriage, and only one has an affair. So it isn't just the marriage. Um, I would say with affairs, some affairs are created. They're the precipitating piece is an existential crisis, the loss of a parent, the loss of a job, the loss, and they're kind of going, "Is that it? Really? I've done all of this. This is all I get." And in that existential crisis, they give themselves permission to go do an affair, have an affair. I would say that some affairs um, are Definitely developmental trauma. They're the crisis that comes from what happened in childhood. That would be me. And there are lots of affairs because we actually have mistaken beliefs about marriage. And so as long as your marriage is giving you everything you want, it's pragmatically smart to stay in the marriage, right? It's everything you want. But marriage has always come to a place where I think they're hard. And so in that hard place, again, if you don't know how to emotionally regulate because of developmental trauma, then a lot of times you'll find other things such as alcohol, drugs, an affair. So then there's also addicts. Some people, that's also in some ways a developmental trauma issue. I would say that not all traumatized children are addicts, but every addict is a traumatized child.
Yeah.
And so again, those wounds, those people can be vulnerable. I also believe that culture, spirits of the air, so to speak, if you are around other people that kind of glorify, deify, whatever infidelity, they're doing it, then people become susceptible and they will go along with it. Bad company, what corrupts good morals, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think media, as you said, is another reason. It's almost like it kind of paints this picture that is possible. I think I sometimes on the web, social media has a piece, but also there's the dating websites. And out of curiosity, I always say when somebody says, you hear this voice in your head, and I don't think this is the voice of God, but
Yeah.
it goes, I wonder if, I
Mm.
wonder if what. And when you pursue that, the answer is always yes, and something happens. I think there is evil in the world. There are so many different reasons, I think. Sometimes, it's almost like somebody just gives in to temptation and, it's opportunity driven. And
So
the problem is,
how could you have protected yourself, for example? So you knew you had this soul wound from you were a kid. If you could go back to 6 months before you were married, or like what did you could you have prevented it? Because it ultimately still is a choice as well. Like we
yeah.
were responsible for what we did, regardless of what happened
Mhm.
to us as kids. And so how do you what do you think you how could you have protected yourself?
Well, so acceptance. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb's gotta really wanna change. And the problem was I kept denying or trying to prove I didn't have a problem, when
Mm,
in reality, if I'd accepted, you know what, I've got a real issue here and I need to do what's necessary to address this thing rather than doing my image management, uh, it would have started by addressing the issue with porn. It would have started by being not living in shame, but instead
being honest, I
being
guess.
honest and
Yeah.
authentic. And, because if I could have accepted what the issue was, I think that we are afraid in the church sometimes, as you know, to be seen as flawed, not perfect,
Ironically.
broken. Yeah, I know it is ironic, isn't it? And when in reality, if I can own that, I can figure out how to live to stay safe, but I can find solutions. But as long as I
Denial
pretend it's
about it.
not
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the dark and I'm gone. So I would have said it's authenticity and
And how can you be
acceptance.
self-aware of that? Because if I think of my own story, like I wasn't aware I wasn't even really being authentic. Like I wouldn't have had the verbiage even to understand that. I was just, surviving, I guess.
Hmm. Well, the problem is, again, back, I'm not trying to blame the church, but if I had been in a church where being um, honest and authentic was actually promoted rather than um, trying to look right, if it been a place of relationship and authenticity versus performance, then I think I would have been able by community to kind of develop a different way of being. And one of the things research shows, Kyle, it's interesting, is when we're in morals, character, integrity are actually created in community. It's not head knowledge, it's living with people who
Yes.
value these things. And so that's why when we get people into these groups where that is the culture, people learn, they develop that ability to be authentic. It's like their integrity increases, their character becomes something new. And I think there are definitely churches that do that, um, but not enough. And hopefully, it's just like AA is great because you can be honest.
Yeah. 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 It's amazing how that's still is so prevalent today. I want to talk about the person that got betrayed, that gets betrayed. What is that person that got cheated on need most initially, and as time goes on?
So the first thing they need is, so there are several barriers to recovery. One thing they need is the truth. They need the story, because until somebody who's been betrayed can write a coherent story where they understand what really happened, um, it's hard for them to emotionally regulate. And the worst problem is people trickle truth. They slowly let out the information over time, which just re-traumatizes that betrayed spouse over and over and over, and makes betrayal trauma much more severe because they're not, every time they think they've got it, that confidence is destroyed again. So the truth, uh, honesty, but also the right type of truth. Uh, One of the things that traumatizes someone is if they get too much information. You answer all their questions. I mean, I always say, never give it, well, you need to answer their questions, but I tell the betrayed spouse, you do not want any sort of information that allows you to create a video or paint a picture in your head,
Yeah.
because those are the things that become intrusive thoughts or traumatic memories, because you'll make up what it looked like, and now that haunts you all the time. The other thing they need is support. They need other uh, betrayed women to
Mm.
be with them who are going through this and are healing and who can grieve with them. They need to be understood. They don't need to isolate. Um, Many of them need to be able to grieve. I mean, but I think just letting them and giving them space and time. So the journey, you said you've dealt with this. For most people, I say the best case scenario is 18 to 24 months. And most people who strayed, I mean, they're kind of wanting them to be over it at about 2 to 3 months. It's kind of like, hello, we've already dealt with this. Why do you keep asking the same question over and over
Yeah.
again?
Yeah.
So they just need a lot of patience and realistic expectations and the right type of help.
Yeah. You mentioned honesty is one of the big things. One of the things I did was polygraphs,
Mhm.
to show there's a foundation point to build off of. Like we need honesty to anything in life. I think that's important. Is that something you advocate for? And how often do you
Oh,
see
yeah.
couples coming in where the guy or the girl that's cheated still keeps lying because they're trying to, they've been brought along with their spouse, but they're still kind of in this addiction haze, and not saying things clearly?
Right. And so polygraphs and knowing how to do that in a structured way is great. Another thing I was just thinking about betrayal trauma, and then we'll go to polygraphs. But with betrayal trauma, there needs to be a lot of education, and they need to understand what's normal, because I think they feel crazy because they can't even control what they're thinking about. It's like they've got all these crazy intrusive thoughts. They're reactive, and their mate's going, "What's wrong with you? Why don't just quit thinking about it?" And they
Yeah.
don't have a choice. So that education's also important. Uh, when you went through it, were you betrayed or were you the one
No,
who strayed?
I was the one who strayed. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Did you feel like your mate was crazy or not listening or what? What was it like?
Um, no, I mean she didn't have much response at all for about 6 months because she was so off emotionally already because of other reasons, and so yeah, did I think she was crazy? No, I think I thought I was crazy more. I didn't understand myself more. I was just like, what is, what's left and right, and also the isolation that comes when something becomes
Right.
public, and yeah,
And I think a lot of times our community doesn't understand. And so you feel a lot of times judged or condemned, or there's a bias frequently. That's one of even therapists will do it. And suddenly you're kind of like, this isn't even safe to be here.
mm,
And that's sad because um, it just leaves you um, more confused and more ashamed, uh, rather than somebody speaking and just saying, look, this isn't who you are. That's not you. Um, yeah, it's maybe a part of you that did this, but you're more than that. It's not the thing, again, that defines you. Hopefully,
yeah,
it'll be the thing that refines you. So, polygraphs are interesting. Um, I think they're especially important if there's been a lot of trickle truth, where you keep telling a new story, a new story, or new details, new details. It's like the betrayed spouse doesn't know where the bottom is, and
that's
that
right.
polygraph gives them the assurance, I would hope, that okay, you've got the story now. You can know that you know it. This is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the education part was so big as well. Just learning about it, books, resources, groups. I mean, it takes time. You have to be patient because it's not. Don't expect to, as much as you want this to go away in a month. Both people do. It's not going away, and you got to deal with it because otherwise it'll deal with you.
Yeah, one of the things that one of our therapists wrote in some of her writing, she says it's almost like if you have a matrix for the wayward spouse. I mean, they were probably unhappy, marital satisfaction. Let's say that's here and this is time. They're unhappy, but when they finally start being honest, I mean, they come up and start feeling pretty good pretty quickly. But the betrayed spouse, they may have been here, now
Yeah,
they're really down, but they stay low for a really long time. It's hard for them to come back up.
yeah,
And that's where I think those of us who strayed was like, why is this taking so long? But I don't know that it's taking long. It's just, it's a hard journey. I always say the one who strayed, all they get is blessed. They
yeah.
finally get this huge burden off and they become hopefully the person they've wanted to be. The person who's been betrayed, they're having to walk the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering. They're the ones that are paying the price for what we did.
That's right.
And it takes a long time for them to come back up again.
Yeah, a lot of people feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. Is that pretty normal?
Oh yeah, totally. Um, I see that every day. And it's like, how did I miss the signs? Now, in some ways, that whole piece of I should have seen it, why didn't I do that? That's actually one of the stages of grief. Grief is about denial, depression, anger, bargaining. And that bargaining stage, rather than kind of getting to acceptance and going through the pain, they just keep questioning and being angry, and it prevents them from finally getting to a place of acceptance. And they also had to be able to heal
Mm,
um, those psychic wounds that have come from this, and they need the right type of help for that.
yeah. How do you, for the person that's betrayed or the person that committed adultery, how do you find people that will help you and help the marriage ultimately? Because I know there's a lot of people that can come around you that say, "Screw that guy, screw that girl, like leave her," and they're not actually helping at
Right.
all. They're actually pushing you away, and I think that's quite common. So how do you what do you say to couples in that spot?
Well, the first thing is, I think everybody thinks they know what they would do if they were in that situation. Nobody knows until they get, in that
Yeah,
situation. Like, was it Mike Tyson that said nobody knows what happens until you get smacked in the face? But that's when you know. And I think one of the things our research has shown is that one of the predictors of whether a couple stays together or doesn't stay together is how many people they talk to. Couples who talk to fewer people have a higher percentage of staying together than couples who tell everybody. Partially because if you tell a lot of people and then you decide to stay married, you have this alternative pressure from family and friends not to do it. So, I mean,
That's if
I
it's not a
think,
public affair, correct?
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's some people that, Richard Rohr says something I like. He says, pain that's not transformed is going to be transmitted. And, it
Yes.
is, there is a natural tendency to want to hurt when you're hurt.
Yeah.
And, there has to be a lot of patience and humility, I think, on the wayward spouse's part as they go through it and understand. I mean, that's a natural response. And it's almost like it's how do you make that up to somebody? All you can do is show that you're really taking responsibility. You're not blaming them for what you did. You're trying to do what you can to make it better restitution. You're trying to do what you can in terms of addressing kind of your issues so that there's hope. Again, words are cheap. In another survey, when I was studying honor shame, I did a survey and asked, what is the one thing your mate could do to make you feel good about yourself, to make you feel honorable again? 84% of respondents said it was their mate working a really strong recovery program, working really
Yes.
hard at not being that person. That's something they could, put their, weight in, but words didn't necessarily do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Rarely do. Rarely do. Actions show what you believe and what you want.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What for the person who's cheated? What's the hardest truth they usually don't want to face?
The hardest truth is I've got a problem. And what am I going to? It's so weird how our shame, the best way to get rid of shame is to blaspheme it. Blasphemy is like taking the name of God and using it as if it's unimportant. Or if money's your God, how would you blaspheme the God of Mammon? Well, the Joker in the Batman movie where he burns the big pile of money. The one thing I know is money wasn't important to him. That's like blaspheming money. The way you blaspheme shame, which is your image, it's like exposing it and being authentic. But we would rather almost hide and act out than face the pain of exposing who we truly are and what we've really done. It's really hard to accept that and to
Especially when your
expose it.
value is based on your actions and what you're doing versus intrinsically who you are, and
Oh,
you don't believe
absolutely.
that God. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. Well, I
what
was
does
gonna
the
ask,
person that go ahead? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what was the hardest thing for you?
Who probably being alone. How alone I was, and I just didn't know where to go and who to talk to, and I didn't feel safe with anybody, and so I was that was by far the hardest thing. How terribly lonely it was, and I think for Nicole as well, because my wife, because she also didn't know who to go to. So you're more isolated than ever,
Right.
and yeah, that was definitely the hardest part. Yeah.
It's one of the interesting things. I agree. And so one of the things we do at a Fair Recovery is we don't even use video. All of the group calls are just audio only
Okay, interesting.
because you don't feel judged. If you're not being exposed that way, ultimately it feels safer just to be a voice than it is for people to know your actual identity. So anonymity is huge. Now, eventually, you get to know these people really well, but we have found that's that's the only way to get beyond that. Isolate. Well, there's probably other ways, but to have a place where you can go and know you won't be shamed, and to
Yeah.
know that you won't be, you just be accepted. You're like everyone else. That's huge.
Yeah, that is really really big. Would you say that the person that is the perpetrator also has an emotional immaturity about them? One of the ways I've heard it explained to me was that usually that there's also porn addiction tied to it or something else like that, which usually has started in childhood. And when you start that in childhood, you stunt your
Oh,
emotional growth.
absolutely.
Like you basically pause until you stop your addiction again. So if you start when you're 10, then you haven't basically grown emotionally until
Right.
you get free, and so you're dealing with a grown up, an adult that's actually that has the emotional wherewithal of a 10-year-old or 12-year-old or whatever it is. Do you agree
Right.
with that?
Yeah, I'm still immature. I think I've got the gift of immaturity. But no, I think totally. What's really weird is what I believed sexuality was about, what I believed marriage was about. All of that was just so immature. I didn't understand. uh, I didn't understand, for instance, what it was to be one, lovemaking. I thought it was just about
Mm,
orgasms. I mean, I thought I'd figured it out at age 12. Um, and it wasn't until after we went through this, and I remember the first time Steph and I came back together, and I was just kind of blown away. I just went, "What was that?" Because I had never really been, I think, totally connected to someone. I was always just concerned about what the experience was rather than being one with somebody.
yeah.
And it was like that's the first time I realized that she was with me because she loved me. She want not
Mm,
because um it wasn't about me. It was about love.
yeah.
And that changed, and it's almost like I was so immature. I look back and go, "How did I not understand that?" But I
Mm.
didn't.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't either. It was actually so it's been 4 years for me now, and I actually only have understood it in the last 6 months. And it was very much tied to my childhood and believing I had no value and
Right.
for what happened there. And so because that was undealt with, I didn't believe someone else could see value in me either or love me. And until I had dealt with that, and that was actually through EMDR and different things like
Mhm.
that, that I actually started to click for me, like, because I understood the concepts in my head. I read about it and stuff like that, but I didn't like. It's a whole other thing to experience it at a safety of what sex actually is. And so, is cheating usually about sex, or is it something deeper? I think I know the answer to this, but
I think cheating is actually about something pretty doggone shallow. Um, it's almost like one of the ways Shirley Glass described it, it's a phase one relationship, which is about feelings. It has nothing to do with true connection. It's like Stephanie to me was this makeup mirror. She showed all my flaws. My affair partner was this vanity mirror. She made me look really good. And
mm,
so there's a part of me in my immaturity, what I liked was the fact of how this made me feel. Um, However, there was nothing real. That was a fantasy. It was an illusion. What was real is what I had with Stephanie here, but that was painful. So intimacy in marriage, uh, 2/3 of the time, practically, it creates short-term instability. In other words, when I share authentically with Stephanie, we're different, right? And yet, when she still loves me anyway, in spite of the difference, now I'm being loved okay as is, good enough just the way I am. when I'm pretending to be what she wants, she's not really loving. Well, I know that she's not loving me as I am because I'm not showing her who I truly am. I mean, you can't be loved unconditionally as long as you're only conditionally letting your mate know you.
Yeah.
But when you let them really know you and they still choose to love you, that's awesome.
Yes, that is. That's right. Yeah, I love that. How transitioning a little bit, if there's a sibling that you have that has cheated, or a son or a daughter or a parent or a friend, often there's shame attached to you as well now, or you feel shame, or you don't know how to deal with that, especially in the church. And so a lot of people then, cut the relationships off, or they don't know how to respond in a healthy way. What would you say to someone in that spot that, they've had someone close to them do this, and what's a healthy way to respond to that person, and how do they deal with their own internal dialogue of this is, you're in the church and my sister or my brother or
Um, well, the kind of smart ass response would be send them to affairrecovery.com. But other than that, I think curiosity is probably the best way to show up, and not being judgmental, but just saying, listening, but saying, well, usually the first question I ask, because of what my mentor Don Finto said, and I even start my sessions this way, Kyle, I always say, what's God telling you? And it's amazing to me with that question, kind of pointing them to a place I think where the answer is. I'll have people tell me, like, well, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. And I'll say, well, I didn't ask whether you believe in God. I just wondered what he's telling you. And they'll say things like, well, he's telling me I should be honest, but I just don't know. And I think that being loving, but not, you also don't want, it's tricky because you also don't want to take sides. Let's say, because I see this happen with family. So let's say somebody, my brother somehow has an affair. And so I sit there and I start working with them. But I'm not encouraging them to do anything back here in the marriage. What's going to happen then is now the spouse over here is going to be upset with me because of this. All you can do probably is say, look, get help. Don't know that I'm the right person to necessarily help you, but you need to address this, and you need to be able to address what's happening here with your family. For if it's parents, because I've had one of my daughter's sons cheated on, husbands cheated on her. And you know what? I was right there trying to give him support and trying to love him and trying to offer resources and doing what I could to let him know that he was still important. I didn't see him as some sort of, blot on the boil on the butt of humanity. I saw him as somebody that was really valuable and I cared about, but also wanted to call him to something higher than what he was doing and trying to say, look, there's ways to be authentic. In the church, I think way too often, people don't know how to respond, and so they withdraw. When in reality, the last thing you need to do is withdraw. Again, you need to let them know you care and try to see if there's a way to give support. Families can create huge problems when they decide that this person that cheated on their spouse, on their kid, their daughter or son, isn't going to be allowed at holidays or something. Now you've really created an issue.
Yeah.
So what does this person do? And so I think families need to figure out how to support both of them. If there's repentance, if there's a desire to try to make things work, it's that try to get rid of your biases and just be concerned about them and let them go through the process and support them in it.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife often would tell me she wished that some of the people that were close to us responded in a way of ostracizing me, or like completely cutting me off. And she's like, well, if they loved me, they would love our marriage, and so that means they would not try to do that, but try to actually help you, because they're actually hurting me now by how they're treating you and making the situation worse. And I always thought that was insightful, because I didn't realize it from her perspective. I didn't necessarily, often didn't know what was going on in her own mind, but when she articulated that to me, that was very helpful.
Right. And I think if you can control the people who know, we always tell people, find 2 to 3 people you can talk to that you both give the good housekeeping seal of approval to. Because the ladies that Steph was talking to, I knew they would still support the marriage. They may be furious with me, but they were still going to support the marriage. And the people I was talking to were the ones that I knew would still accept her. And so we needed safe people. We both needed other people to talk to besides each other. But it also, we had to find people that were safe for us to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. What does forgiveness look like? And how does that happen, of the person that's being cheated on? How do they forgive? How do you teach that?
So I think you need to divide forgiveness into different pieces. Um, there's one form of forgiveness that is vertical or internal. It's between you and God. It's internal. Jesus on the cross, Father, forgive them. They just don't get it. Please don't give them what they deserve. And that is a gift that I give myself. This is where I let go of
It's
my need for,
self-forgiveness.
yeah, well, not self. This is where I release the wrongs done against me so that I'm not feeling a need to punish them.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And so I don't have that feeling of retaliation. In fact, I can care for them. There's Everett Worthington's work is really good on this, but there's several good books, but to me, it's letting go of my need to hurt them, so I don't feel the unforgiveness. The second one is Luke 17, where Jesus said, "If your uh, if your spouse cheats on you, rebuke them." In other words, tell them what they've done. Share with them. If they repent, if your brother sins against you, rebuke them. If they repent, he says, forgive them. If they do it 7 times in a day and 7 times repent, forgive 7 times. That's the only place where in Jesus' teachings on forgiveness, it's not about, because he says forgiveness is not optional in every other place. So I think he's talking about horizontal forgiveness or reconciliation. In other words, there's self where I let go of my need to punish you. That's a gift I give me. But then there's reconciliation. Uh, some people call it exoneration, where you enter back into relationship. But the key factor there is the other person has to be safe. Safety is the issue. They have to be worthy of forgiveness, not earn it, but safe enough to forgive. Then there's a third type of forgiveness that is ultimately that self-forgiveness that you're talking about. And the people that struggle the most with self-forgiveness are pretty much the betrayed spouse, only because there was some point in their life where they made this inner vow that they would never be with somebody who cheated on them. And now that they're working on the relationship, they feel like they're compromising themselves because of this inner vow they made that they wouldn't do this. And I think people don't realize that I swore I made this inner vow that I'd never be angry like my dad. Guess what?
You were
That was
angry like
kind
your
of a
dad.
dumb thing for me to say. I was angry like my dad. So um, God didn't care that I said I wasn't going to do that. So I had to accept that, okay, I've got a problem. Once I could accept it, I could do something about it. With inner vows like, I'm never going to be with someone who cheats on me, you have to start by breaking that inner vow. You have to be able to say, you know what? I said once upon a time I wouldn't be with somebody who did this, but I was young and I didn't understand things. And there's lots of reasons to be with, in this marriage right now.
Yeah.
And so you break the vow. You have to also figure out what's the lie I'm believing that keeps me from forgiving myself? Am I saying what I've done is just unforgivable, or this is just unforgivable? Um, if you say that, I always tell people, look, I know plenty of people who've been able to forgive it. So it's not that it's unforgivable. It's that you're choosing not to forgive. And that's okay. But at least have the integrity to admit what the real issue is, which is you choose not to.
Yeah.
And so I always look at it because, you know this. Part of the problem is if you're the one who cheated and you've blown up the world like I did. Um, I also have to figure out how to accept God's forgiveness and um, put it under the blood of Jesus and understand it's not me. There's a verse in Revelation 12 that was huge for me, where it says, talking about the accuser of the brethren, they just said, they overcame him. They overcame that voice of shame, or that, accusatory voice, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They didn't love their life so much as to shrink from death. And I think what they were doing is every time they would hear that voice say, you failed, or you cheated, or you lied, they would go, well, yeah. But you want to know what's incredible? The blood of Jesus covers even that. And I still get credit for everything I never did. They made it God's story, not about their failure, but about the miracle God had worked in their life. And when it's God's story, there's no shame. When it's my story, it looks pretty grim. And that's kind of how I began to look at it.
You said the person, not about self-forgiveness, but forgiving the other person, they have to be safe enough to forgive.
Yes.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Because you can forgive someone that never chooses to go get healthy and a divorce happens and they're off on their own, but you can still choose to, that's a gift you give to yourself when you forgive someone, right?
Right. So for reconciliation, so I can forgive someone and divorce them. And I've got people I've forgiven, but they're not safe. And I'm not in relationship with them.
Yeah.
Not because I haven't forgiven them or I'm angry at them. I want good for them, but I'm not about to be in a relationship because they're not safe. They haven't repented. They haven't taken responsibility. So someone, to me, for reconciliation, it does require, like your wife, she had to be willing to let you make amends and give you opportunity to show that you're going to not be that other person. Steph always says, I like my second husband, just not that fond of the first one, which was also me, but she does like the second one, right? However, if someone's going to be worthy of forgiveness, they are going to, ultimately, they're going to stop the behavior.
Worthy of forgiveness or worthy of reconciliation? Because I think
worthy of reconciliation. No, nobody's worthy of forgiveness.
That's
forgiveness. Right. Forgiveness, I do just, because I care about.
Yeah.
No, it's not even about their repentance. It's just I do that because I don't want to live in bitterness the rest of my life. I want to live well. I don't want them to control me or be a victim. People who don't forgive are forever a victim. They're resentful and they're a victim.
Yeah.
But for reconciliation, the person that's offended you has to stop the behavior. They have to take responsibility and not blame you. You want to see that they care, that they hurt you, that there's genuine remorse and regret. There needs to be restitution, a willingness to help. You want to see somebody that wants to help you heal, and there needs to be reform where you see them working at not being that other person. If you've got somebody doing that, then they're safe to reconcile with if you choose to do that. And I think, you're willing to take polygraphs. You're working at EMDR. You're working at changing. What is wrong with me? You're trying to take responsibility. You're not blaming your wife. That makes you a good candidate to reconcile with. If, on the other hand, you said, look, you're just blowing this out of proportion and there's nothing wrong with me, I just won't do it again, trust me, and you need to get over it, that person isn't necessarily safe.
Yeah. Yeah, that
So
makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's pretty, people can reconcile, but again, you won't know except over time.
That's right.
Um, it's
Yeah.
going to take a year to 2 years before you know if the other person's going to stay the course.
Yeah. 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 So I think that on the forgiveness side, that's something that's going to happen always. With the reconciliation side, that it takes two to tango for that
Mhm.
to happen.
Well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I like in today's culture, you see that people are getting married and getting divorced 6 months later. It's marriage is not what it once was. It's not viewed as a very valuable thing at all. Why should men and women still pursue one partner for life? What's in your own beliefs? What's the value in it? Why is it sacred? Why should we continue to pursue protecting it? Because I feel like that's not, we're somehow as a culture infected by, or the church has been infected by the fact that this is not, really worth the time,
Yeah.
and it
So
is not that great of a thing. What would you say to that?
I would say that we're created in the Imago Dei and in the image of God. And the bottom line is, and I think there's plenty of research to support this, but we are wired for monogamy. It's how we were made. One of the ways that we image God, so to speak, is in our oneness, in our union as husband and wife. I mean, the first marriage in Genesis chapter 2 is really clear. In fact, to me, that was an amazing. Well, some of the older catechisms talk about this. It would say that uh, there was this eternal exchange of life between the Father and the Son, and from that proceeded the Holy Spirit. One of the ways we image God is there's this exchange of love between a man and a woman, and from that proceeds life, children. So it is kind of how we were made, I believe. And it is something that literally, I think, grows us up. I mean, marriage is God's primary people growing machine. And the problem with not being married is you end up with a lot of self centered, immature people. Um, it's hard to be married and it's hard to raise kids. But I
Yeah.
still think we are trying a social experiment that's never been done before historically. And a lot of times when you try out new things, you find out they don't work that well because I think it ends up with people being more isolated. People, well, longevity. I mean, the research is so clear. In a marriage, we live longer, we are happier. I mean, there's tons of stuff on this. So why do we suddenly think that not marriage is going to be the answer to all of this? Because it's showing that you're not happier. You do have a shorter lifespan. Do you know if you're lonely that there's a 28% increase for stroke, 33% increase for heart attack just from being alone?
Yeah. It's incredible.
Man wasn't made to be alone.
No. No. Well, in what cases is divorce something you recommend? When is it okay? When is it okay to say I can't stay in this marriage anymore? Uh, how do you counsel couples or someone that's in that spot? And is it just when the other person doesn't show up, or is it like
Well, I think um, so. Teshuva is the Hebrew word for repentance, and it has a couple of concepts. But one concept is they stop the behavior. And I think that certainly it's difficult to maintain a monogamous relationship if the other person isn't going to do the work necessary to be monogamous. And I'm not saying that people will change a porn addiction or a, a lot of these habits right away, but they do the work to they keep working till they get there. It's progress, not perfection, as we would say in AA. But yeah, one of the primary reasons people get divorced is because the person doesn't stop the behavior. Another reason is because the person who strayed is choosing not to come back. There's lots of ways in Hebrew culture. There were 3 reasons the rabbis taught divorce. One was abuse, abandonment, adultery. And it's interesting, Jesus was asked, is it okay to divorce for any and every reason? What Jesus was speaking to isn't every case for why someone would be divorced, but he is speaking to a problem in culture in those days, which is no-fault divorce, basically. And Jesus was saying, no, there has to be a specific reason. Adultery is one of those reasons. I think if someone's being abusive, that definitely you need to get divorced. I think if someone is abandonment is huge. And hopefully infidelity is that wake-up call that matures you and gets you to see that you need to get your act together. But sometimes there's a term that Seal and Siegel came out with in the 1990s called accusatory suffering. There are some people who, because they've been betrayed, don't want to get better. It's almost like if they got better, what was a major backstabbing might look like a minor paper cut. So they choose to continue to be the victim. They choose to continue to not heal, almost to punish the other person. They become a living memorial to what's happened. I think there are times that out of love, you get away from a person like that because your presence isn't going to help them heal. They may not be able to heal until you're gone. Now, that's a rare sort of circumstance, but hopefully we have the grace to grow and to learn and to do the work together to, if anything, you learn to be intimate. I think for Steph and I, Kyle, one of the things we learned, we talked so much about everything after that. And we never talked even close to as much as we talked after that. And that intimacy is also the thing that's kept us safe, because if either one of us begins to disconnect, we feel it because we have a high level of intimacy. Prior to the affair, on a scale of 1 to 10, our intimacy was probably about a 2. So if somebody's disconnecting, we hardly noticed it. But it's once it got up here, we noticed it when there was a problem.
Yeah.
You may have experienced that too, but I love my marriage now.
Yeah. Yes. Same here. We had almost no intimacy at all. And I didn't even know there was a level of intimacy that higher than what I was experiencing that was possible, because I'd never experienced it my whole life previous to that. And so I always often recommend people to don't judge things by how they are right now. It's been only 3 months or 6 months. Like, it's make a judgment at 24 months or 36 months, because
Right.
Conflict is the pathway to intimacy, and if you continue to do the work, you will get to a level that you don't have a category for yet, and that's definitely been my own experience.
So one of the things I wonder if y'all experience is most couples will start doing better, and then they'll hit the 1-year mark and it gets really bad again, and they think we haven't made any progress. But when that 1-year anniversary comes up, it typically triggers a lot, activates a lot of the trauma that happened a year prior. Then it gets better again. It's not as bad at 2 years. At 5 years, people laugh. At 35 years, somebody asked Stephanie recently, they were telling her about somebody who'd been cheated on, and Steph's first response was, "Man, I can't imagine what that would feel like." And her friend's going, "Of course you can imagine what it would feel like." But it gets to the point to where it's not the thing you think about at all.
Yeah. I think for us, it was, we separated 5 times over 3 years. And I think the biggest reason for that was, I expected of myself I'm not sure exactly what Nicole expected, but I expected perfection, not progress. I was
Hmm.
coming over deep addictions and stuff like that, and so if I had the smallest screw up, I was just like, I'm useless. I might as well leave. What's the point of all
Right.
this? And that definitely wasn't helpful. And we were figuring it out on our own. It wasn't. Eventually, we started getting more and more people into our lives and good counseling and coaching, and you know books and videos and everything, because we both wanted it to work, but yeah, at first you're pretty blind, or at least we were, and I think a lot of people are as well. Like, you just don't know what you don't know.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So yeah, we talked about conflict being the pathway to intimacy. What would you? I want to switch to the church briefly. We talked about it a few times already, but how does the church respond to affairs in a healthy way and in a non-healthy way? I mean, you've heard a lot of stories over the years. Do you see some common threads in how churches respond in the negative and the positive?
Um, so I think that first off, having churches that respond in a healthy way, I think have um, people who have been through this that can come and testify, can actually help. And I've seen a lot of churches, they'll have them go talk to couples who have already been through it, who can say, hey, this is what happened. Or, we work with a lot of churches that will refer back and then say, we'll tell them, we'll say, look, let us help stabilize the couple. You work on this, some of the spiritual aspect, but we can help deal with this and integrate you into this process so that you're doing things that are helpful. The part of the problem that churches get into is advice that is given because they don't understand. And I used to have a bad advice blog where I would give a free, if you could enter the worst advice you were given, and then they would get a free program. And I was always astounded. It was things like, well, honey, you do know if you probably lost 25 pounds, he wouldn't have cheated. So you need to start working on that
Oh
weight
my.
thing. Or if you'd been having more sex, or, you know, you're kind of dressed frumpy. You need to start. I mean, it was insane. Or they would just simply say, well, so what? Okay, so you need to look at what are you doing that caused them to do that? Or they would say, you know what? You just need to forgive them and not ever bring it up again. And I was astounded at what churches would do that I think were really, and therapists too, was crazy. Um, or they would support the wayward spouse and ignore the betrayed spouse. So there were so many things that they didn't know how to support both parties. And I think developing something so you could give support. I mean, when they would give them a card like, go to fairrecovery.com, take the book pamphlet, come back here. I want to hook you up with some other people that you can talk to. Let's get you in a group. You need the church to come along beside. Part of the problem for churches, this isn't like divorce care. It's not like marriage enrichment. Uh, Couples dealing with infidelity are on fire, and it is a crisis. And so it's the ability to know where to find the resources, because they will drain all your time. They need a lot of time. One of the beauties of, I think, the way we do it, once you're in that community, you've got people there to talk to 24/7. But as a therapist, when I see someone, I see them once a week. But that's like spitting on a forest fire or something. It ain't going to
Yeah,
be enough. So they need that community to help, kind of like a carbon rod in a nuclear reactor, to help them emotionally regulate. And if churches can give that type of support to them or get them to those resources and then still give them support, that's huge. But it needs to be non-biased.
yeah,
And that's hard.
yeah. Yeah, definitely the couples that have helped us the most were non-biased, and it was always actually surprising to me because I grew up in a church culture where if you there's the worst sin of all time was cheating, or at least my perspective it was, and where there was like
Oh yeah,
in
years and years.
some you have to sit in the front of church even sometimes and do confession of guilt, and there's like this big shame thing, and so it's really focused on we help the victim, but we don't help anybody else. But
Right.
um, how I was actually helped, or we were helped, was we had couples. One couple that would show up at our house 3 times a week. Some evenings because things were going sideways again, and then they gave their house to us on the weekends. One of us could stay at their house over the weekends and have a break. There was just different things that they were doing and actually walking alongside of us, plus all the other things. But you're right, you're on fire. There's a lot going on.
One of the things I think people don't understand, especially for the betrayed spouse, it takes 1/200th of a second for them to go from here to here. And so once they're activated, the reality is for the wayward spouse, there's not a lot you can do to bring them back, as they slowly heal from the trauma. I mean, it isn't just like they pop back. And typically, you probably, just like I could with Steph for a while, I could outregulate her. I could handle her
Mm.
dysregulation for a while, but there always came a point to where once I got dysregulated, um, the show was about to begin. And so, one of the things you've got to help couples understand is be aware what part of you is talking, what's happening when you're dysregulated. And for the wayward spouse, which is, this isn't true all the time, majority of the time, when they get to the point where they're about to flood, they need to say, hey, I need to take a time out because I'm not safe for us right now. I'm going to say or do something that I don't want to do, and I need to calm down so I can show up the way I need to show up for you. But they don't do that. And as you know, well, maybe not in your case, but most couples, they don't know how to create safety. Um,
Yeah.
like marathoning. Did y'all ever do the marathoning thing where she asked a question at 8 o'clock and you're still talking about it at 4 o'clock in the morning? That was one of
No.
the things Steph and I did. So,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we had to learn a lot. It wasn't just that we to recover from the affair. We needed to learn how to do relationship in it by itself. Even if there was no affair that ever happened, we needed a lot of help, and there was a lot of healing that needed to happen. So it's just this is what makes it pop. I mean, I think
right.
Nicole said to me at one point, and I've shared it here in the podcast before: if you don't deal with the pain of what happened to you as a kid, you're never going to stay married.
Oh,
So
yeah.
pick your pain. Pick the pain of not being married, or pick the pain of dealing with that. And so I chose to pick the
Well
pain of
said.
having. Yeah, yeah. What would you say to the person listening right now who's had an affair or is having an affair, but nobody knows?
My first thought that came to mind, your sins will find you out, do something. I mean, the fact is, you can only go. I've had people that have been able to hide it for a long time, but here's the thing, you're miserable and you know it.
You're
I
dying.
look back and I was doing the very thing that I thought would make me happy in one way, but I was more miserable than I'd ever been in my entire life. And as I look at it now, I go, that was crazy. So get help. Find somebody who knows what they're doing, who understands, who's been through it. Because I do think there's an advantage of having people who have experienced it, and talk to them and let them give you some guidance. At Affair Recovery, one of the things we do is to be a therapist here or to be one of our group leaders, you have to have been through it. We don't have anybody that doesn't
Understand?
have firsthand knowledge.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Definitely go talk to someone because it's not better where you're at now. Um, what are your resources that you offer? So you have affairrecovery.com. I think you guys recently started a podcast as well.
Yeah, we got a lot of resources. So we have a YouTube channel that's got almost 2,000 YouTube videos, and I guess we got over 100,000 now on that subscription. And we've got a podcast we just started. And I would say the podcast is unique because it's more of a panel discussion, and we've been getting good feedback from that. On our website, there are so many resources, mentor stories where you can listen to other couples. We have a recovery library that's got over 6,000 resources in it. So you can type in a question of something you're struggling with, and there'll be an article or a video specifically to help. And then there's also, I mentioned the Affair Analyzer, there's boot camp. But the thing that is the most powerful, we have 3 courses. There is a course for the marriage. We have one in-person event, but there's a 13-week course where you're put in a cohort with other couples going through this. And that has an amazing success rate in terms of treating PTSD, anxiety, depression. But in that community, you're normal, and it takes away the shame.
Yeah.
And it works on empathy development. So you probably noticed this in your own recovery, but what the betrayed spouse needs isn't more information. It's really empathy and emotional responsiveness. It's that compassion. That's what lets them heal that attachment. Then we have a course for the wayward spouse. And in that, it causes you to look at what are the thinking areas? How did I get myself here in the first place? What is the developmental trauma? How can I support my mate? And how do I make sure this never happens again? And then there's also a course for the betrayed spouse called Hope for Healing. And no, it's Harboring Hope. Hope for Healing is the wayward spouse. And it's how do you grieve and work through this? But there's support because we put women with women, you've got 5 other women going through this with you. And so it creates a discussion and normalizes things. And same with Hope for Healing. When you're in that course, having other people going through this, where you can we do talk to them every day. It's an amazing support and helps get you to the other side of it. And EMS Online, it's what I find interesting is in these courses, most people will say some of their best friends in the entire world are people they've gone through this with because they know these are people that know them at a level that nobody else knows them at, and they feel accepted. So to me, just being able to find safety is going to be big. And so we try to do that through the website, or the YouTube videos. It's interesting to me how many people will just listen to video after video, just using that as a way of self-soothing. So they know that they're not crazy because you
That's
feel
right.
crazy.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. How are you doing on your goal of reaching 50,000 couples a year?
So on the current trajectory, we'll be there, I think, easily within 10 years. So we're moving nicely.
That's awesome.
We say, I think it'll actually probably happen much faster than that, but we were watching the growth rate, and yeah, we'll make it. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Rick. I love your openness, and I love the work that you do, bring real healing to a lot of people. So it's needed, and I appreciate your time today.
And tell Nicole, thank you very much for staying with you. That I appreciate that. I'm glad you're still married.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the show. If you did like it and appreciate it, please share it with somebody or leave a comment that goes a long way. Or if you have questions on this topic, send them in, and maybe Rick will come back one day and we'll do another one and do some listener questions. So
absolutely, you and I were both bottom dwelling, slime sucking scumbags. We can sit there and have fun together, right?
Forgiven ones.
Exactly, you're my people.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed that episode and were blessed by it, would you be willing to support the show? That would help a lot in creating more content, improving the quality of the content, putting the production value, getting more guests on, and me being able to spend more time and energy towards it. So if you're interested in doing that, you can click up here and it'll take you to a support page. But you can also subscribe to the podcast by clicking over here and doing that. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.